So when was your first publishing deal? You get there in '87. How long was it before you were signed?
I had a cut before I was no. Let me see. My first stuff, I was doing songs individually. Single song contracts with first a guy named Dennis Morgan, who's a Hall of Fame songwriter. He published my first songs, and he published my first cut. But I wasn't getting a draw or anything like that. I was just bringing songs, and the ones he'd like, he goes, "Yeah, I'll pitch this."
Okay.
And my first cut was a Christmas song recorded by Randy
Yeah. I was
Travis,
just gonna say,
and
yeah,
he
meet me under the mistletoe.
yeah, and he
Yeah.
pitched that. But like he wasn't because he wasn't a full fledged publisher yet. He wasn't in a position to give me a job with a draw and to get me out of the bar business. So from him, I moved on, and I was lucky enough to meet the people at 1010, and I still was never really fully signed. I was always working at the Bluebird until Here in the Real World hit, and
Okay.
then after that, I was able to like walk into pretty much any publisher I wanted, and everybody was willing to work with me.
So here in the
You know,
real world was done basically independently, outside of a publishing
um,
deal.
I had a publisher on that song, but like a single song contract
Yeah.
on that song with 1010, but I wasn't signed as a writer.
Right.
I
So you
wasn't on
weren't
their
doing
roster.
like the cubicle writing yet, basically.
Not yet. I was
Okay.
still working in the evening supporting myself.
Right.
And then it was after Real World. I got an offer from EMI, Robin Palmer, and a woman named Celia Frolig. And that was a great time, because albums were selling, thanks to people like Alan Jackson or Clint Black or Randy Travis and then Garth Brooks. Albums were selling really well, country music. And even if you weren't getting the singles, if you were getting songs on those albums, you were still making a good living.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier when you were still in New York, living with your or hanging out with your buddy who wanted to be more of an artist. You wanted to be more of a writer. So now that you're in Nashville, when you're writing early on, are you writing for yourself or are you writing with other people in mind all the time?
I never came into town thinking I was going to be the artist. I mean, I was always, I knew of the Tin Pan Alley days, and I knew that in some relation was kind of what Nashville was. I came to town wanting to get songs recorded by Ricky Skaggs. I loved Ricky back then when he was doing his mainstream country thing,
Yeah.
and people like Lee Greenwood and, people like that back in the day. And then it turned into people like Alan Jackson and Garth Brooks and people like that. But no, I always came in wanting to be a songwriter and not the artist.
Did you ever have specific artists in mind before you were signed when you were writing?
Um, I don't know. We were just sitting down trying to write. I guess back then I assumed if it was good for one person, it would be good for any of them. A
Okay.
hit was a
Yeah.
hit.
Right. Right.
And we were just trying to write the best songs we could. But as I've gotten more into writing for a publisher, I know what you mean by we call it target writing.
Yep.
Like, oh, Tim McGraw's cutting in a month, man. Let's sit down, let's write a couple of songs, try to get us a Tim McGraw cut.
Yeah.
But back then we weren't thinking about it quite like that. I mean, maybe because it was naive and not very sophisticated when it came to the business or how the business worked.
Do you feel like that kind of writing is harder for a songwriter, that target
It is
writing?
for me. It is for me. And I'll tell you the truth, half the times I have one artist in mind. It's not that artist who records the song, if the song gets recorded at all.
I've heard
It's
that
somebody
from
else.
multiple
Yeah.
songwriters, and
Yeah.
more often than not.
I was lucky twice, and they were big. I mean, I'm not shrugging it off. Josh Kier and Andrew Dorff and I, we got together. We knew that Blake Shelton was cutting soon. Andrew had this idea, neon light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And when we wrote it, we definitely were thinking Blake and nothing but the Blake.
Yeah.
And a week later, it was on hold. And a week after that, he cut it. All have the stars aligned on that. Like they don't happen very often.
I just want to say, great writer Andrew Dorff, and rest in peace. What a great writer.
Yeah.
Very,
And just a wonderful guy.
yeah, very underrated writer, I feel, in my opinion, and I wish more people knew about Andrew Dorff. I'm
Well,
glad.
when he passed away, the world was robbed of the great songs he was going to write.
Absolutely, I could not say it any better than that. I'm
People
glad.
always ask me what my favorite song that I've written is, and as much as a piece of art, there's a song called "Friend of a Friend" that Tim McGraw recorded that I wrote with Andrew and Josh, and it's just really to me, it shows Andrew's lyric writing at its best,
Mm-hmm.
and I was so thrilled to be a part of that.
You
You
know
know,
what
and
I
John,
find so serendipitous about Andrew Dorff too. It's so funny and ironic in a way. He was such a great lyrical writer, and
yeah,
his
he's a poet.
dad was the absolute opposite of that.
Yeah,
His dad is
yeah,
like one of the most melodic writers in the history of music, and it's so ironic that his son ended up being such a lyrical genius, in my opinion. But yeah, the
hundred
Dorff
percent.
family is ridiculous, man. But yeah, so the first cut's a Christmas song. Is that a
It was nice.
letdown, or are you like, wow, man, Randy Travis?
No, because Randy was the big thing. He was the thing at the time. He was the
Right.
guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I was thrilled. I mean, oh my God, no, I was thrilled. I was so excited about it. Let me tell you, the people, Amy Curlin originally owned the Bluebird. Now it's owned by NSAI.
Hmm.
But I mean, I couldn't shut up about it. And I was still working there. And she went out, and when the album came out, she got the album matted and framed for me.
Wow.
And she like her and everybody was running. They presented it to me like it was a big award, which it was.
Yeah.
And she said, "Now would you just shut up about it?" I'll
So
never
what?
forget that.
What's the motivation to write a Christmas song?
Well, actually, it's funny you say that. Now you got me thinking on it. That was one of the rare times as an unsigned young writer, we did hear that people were looking for Christmas songs. So
Huh.
we wrote it in July of that year, whatever year
Wow.
that was, 88 or 89. And that was specific, not necessarily specific for Randy Travis, but we knew a few artists were going to be cutting Christmas albums, and we knew we had to get it done because they were going to be cutting it a lot, had to be done like by the fall.
I imagine writing new material for holidays is going to be daunting because what already exists is so iconic. You know what I mean?
100%, 100%. And again, we were too young and dumb to think it that way. We just said, "Yeah, let's go write a Christmas song."
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, because it's hard to write them and not sound corny,
Yeah.
and or not being like derivative
Well, not
of.
to mention all of those iconic songs are public domain, right? So like they don't even
Yeah,
have to pay the writers for their royalties and
yeah,
stuff too.
yeah,
So from
yeah.
a business standpoint, it probably makes better sense too. But
And let me tell you, I've written many other Christmas songs, and they're pretty bad.
well, again, like I said, it's got to be tough because what already exists is so difficult to surpass. I would feel.